Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And welcome to Andor Candor, which is our podcast series all about Andor. And I'm sad to say, Sarah, this is one of our final episodes of Andor. This is the final episode of Andor Season 1.
It is.
Oh, man. We made it.
So sad to know that we're not going to be getting Andor on the weekly for probably another calendar year. If not longer. And I don't know how to handle that because we have waited for this series for so long. I think we've all been anticipating it for even longer than it's been announced. And it's here, we've gotten to do such cool things and just enjoy the ever loving heck out of the show. And now we're at the end of it. It's well, what comes after this? And right now it's nothing for the moment. But it will be something eventually. But yeah, I'm sad to be here, but I'm grateful that we and the Star Wars community and our listeners and we've all gone on this journey together because, gosh, this show has been so good. So good.
I can confidently say one of the best seasons of any Star Wars TV, if not TV in general, just from start to finish. This was a journey. Coming into the show, we really didn't know what to expect in terms of quality, in terms of story, and I'm just completely blown away. And I'm so happy to be here talking about episode number 12, which is directed by Benjamin Caron and written by Tony Gilroy. Two excellent people to send us off at the end of season 1. And yeah, it's hard to believe we're going to be waiting a while. Thankfully, they are already shooting season 2 as we speak, which gives me a little bit of hope. Yeah. So maybe we'll see it towards the tail end of 2023 or spring of 2024.
So far away.
Still so far away. Yes.
I say that, but it's much less farther away than BTS's return as a group. So put it into perspective, Sarah. Get it together. Yeah, no, gosh, it does feel so far away though, because especially for me, as somebody who isn't the world's biggest Mando fan or Mandoverse fan. So I'm not necessarily as excited about those things as I know other members of the Star Wars community are. So I feel I'm just going to sit and twiddle my thumbs for a while, enjoy some High Republic and
And hey, maybe we'll get the Acolyte before Andor season 2, or maybe they'll happen kind of concurrently with each other, which would be really exciting to get those right. Next to each other, we got Obi-Wan and Andor next to each other. So who knows what the future holds? It's exciting.
Yeah, and they're Acolyte's filming right now too, and Acolyte recently started filming. So who knows? I feel like. I mean, I'm bullshitting right now, but I feel like Andor is going to probably be a longer shoot, which probably means longer post. But. What do I know? Nothing. I really don't have any inside information on that or the the scope of or their schedule, or the scope of the show. But even just with the set that I don't know, somebody posted a aerial photo of the set that they built outside. It wasn't as built out as something like Ferrix was for the Acolyte. So it makes me wonder, not in a bad way by any means, but just the world they're creating and what resources they're using to create it. So yeah, who knows? Maybe the Acolyte will come before Andor. That'd be really interesting.
Besides the point, yeah, Andor season 1 is just a complete masterpiece. I hope this comes out on physical too, because I want to own the show. I want it on my bookshelf. I want to pull out the 4K disc and pop it in and binge the whole thing. I don't know about you, but I'm totally binging all 12 episodes at some point. I'm going to have an Andor day. One of these weekends in the winter. A lot of
very heavy television.
But it's so fun. Imagine going from start to finish with the show. It's just it was such a blast. So I'm really thrilled to be here talking. We're thrilled to be sharing this episode with you all early Wednesday morning. We were lucky enough to see these episodes, last 2 episodes early. So I've watched the finale 3 times. Sarah's watched it twice. But yeah, we are recording this a couple days early before the episode drops. So a little bit of news tonight as well. We just, right before we came on podcasting, we learned that Bob Iger is now officially the new CEO of Walt Disney Company, effective immediately. So he's ousting Bob Chapek, who is no longer the CEO. So
on an evening on a Sunday.
Yeah. So that was some news to see right before. So Twitter is very very meme worthy right now.
The jokes are popping off. They're so good.
So
But yeah, the
welcome back, Bob.
fascinating. Well, it was a bob for a bob, like just little bobs everywhere. I guess I guess if you're like, wow, I would like my child to become the CEO of the Walt Disney Company one day, you just have to name them Bob, because that's the only way anybody gets the job these days. Um, Sucks for Bob Chapek. Probably also sucks for Bob Iger because he's old. No offense to Bob Iger,
He
but
wanted to
doesn't he
be retired. Yeah.
doesn't he want to retire and go spend time with his family and sit in nice weather instead of running one of the biggest companies? I don't know. I feel like I'd get stressed.
Yeah, I would definitely be stressed, but hopefully Bob Iger renews Andor for like 10 more seasons. I would love that. So, Bob, I know you're a regular listener of the podcast. It might have influenced your decision to come back.
Close personal friend, yeah.
So if you hear this, renew Andor is all I'm saying. But we are renewing our excitement about Andor as we talk about it here. So let's get into it. Season 1 finale. I feel like every time we watch any sort of finale for a television show, it's one of those things that could really falter the bag at the very end. That could fumble the bag at the end, despite maybe a strong start or a strong entire season. So there's a lot of pressure that goes on these episodes, and people always wonder, will it stick the landing? And I for one think that Andor stuck the landing right up until the end, which makes me very happy, because it would have been such a shame to see such a good season be marred by maybe a lesser quality finale. But that's not the case here. The finale was awesome. It was filled with emotion, filled with heart, filled with themes of rebellion and of community coming together. I love that we start the series on Ferrix and we end on Ferrix, right? It's not what you would expect in Star Wars, where you start on this sort of unfamiliar, small, community-driven planet that we've never heard of before. Like, typically you'd think Star Wars is going to go to the big planet or the big space battle at the very end of the show, right? But no, this is just everyday people rising up and deciding that they've had enough. So, spoilers ahead, by the way. So we're talking spoilers, even though this is out early in the morning. But yeah, what did you think, Sarah?
As I was watching this finale, I was so overwhelmed emotionally and so fulfilled emotionally, because this story is really brought home with this episode. And I think that this, there was a chance that it could have, totally messed everything up, or not made sense, or not had a clear resolution, or not, pushed us forward into the next season. But it did all of those things. And it really soared as a finale. It was both very loud and very quiet. The acts of rebellion from the people of Ferrix, they might just be one place and one community, but it's so clear that this act is, the biggest thing thus far for them and for all our characters. And it was so incredible. I said this on our last episode, but I really do mean it. These last couple of episodes and this whole series feels like the Alphabet Squadron novels come to life, in terms of the depth and specificity and just attention to world and character detail as possible. And that's such a high compliment, that I can give, because I admire those books beyond so much. Alexander Freed, genius. So I feel so thrilled with this ending. And oh my God, I cried. I was standing up, I was yelling, I was crying. I'm standing up as we record the podcast. That's how good I'm feeling about recording the podcast. That I'm going to stand perhaps the whole time. We'll see. But yeah, I just, man, it's so good, and it's fresh, and it is interesting, and it is relevant and prescient to our own real world, and it's thoughtful and specific, and nobody dies.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, literally everybody we've been following is on this planet. Somebody's going to kick the bucket. Nobody did. Nobody did. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I love it when this happens. Just this once, everybody lives. So yeah, I'm so thrilled by it. I will let us get on with the conversation here, but I could just smile and nod about it all day long.
It's quite remarkable, and we've talked a lot about how the show doesn't feature any Jedi or any of those sorts of characters. Again, these are just average people. They're just people, right? Rising up, and rebellion fomenting, pockets of fomenting. Like it's so brilliant to have the story told in such a focused way, and Cassian being at the center of it. I love that the town sort of resents Cassian for bringing the Empire there. And then Cassian returns to this planet, and the residents decide to fight back against the Empire. It's like, we don't care about Cassian anymore. We care about these people who have laid their claim to our home and are tearing it apart. And they've hung somebody in Rix Road, and Bix is a prisoner. Like this, we've had enough. We've had enough. And now Marva's dead. And Marva was a symbol for so long as one of the daughters of Ferrix. Her speech just incites everything. And it's incredible that we got Andy Serkis and Stellan Skarsgård speeches in episode 10, which I think those two, especially even more so Stellan Skarsgård's speech as Luthen, is like, they're going to go down as some of the greatest speeches in Star Wars history. I was listening to the Ringerverse, and Ben Lindenberg over there was talking about how like a lot of Star Wars quotes often are just very quotable, but they don't necessarily have this sort of like poetry to them. It's just like, oh yeah, I know those quotes. But like Luthen's speech especially was more like Shakespearean in nature. And I feel like the same thing with not only Marva's speech in this episode, but Nemec's manifesto, and hearing finally like connecting it to the idea of rebellion and how it's so resonant throughout all time periods in Star Wars, and the idea about how tyranny requires constant effort, and it just takes one person or one thing or one siege to bring it all down. And that's just such a powerful statement. So like, I just can't believe we've now had like 4 incredibly moving, powerful, bring you to tears speeches, like just make your jaw drop in the show, like within a couple episodes of each other. And Star Wars fans will be talking about these speeches for years. They will be talking about them forever. Like, this is so Star Wars. It's going to be ingrained in the conversation. We cannot separate these from our discussions any longer. Like, it's so brilliant.
We're talking about speeches and we're talking about voiceover here as well. We just have to mention Clem's speech as well. Like,
yeah.
Cassian goes back home, and it seems like he's at a wall and he's at a stone. And I think you can assume, because you're hearing Clem's voiceover, that is the stone for his father, the brick for his father. You know, and the importance of their relationship, and being scrappy and being resourceful. Gosh, this episode just like brings it all together. And you could think like, oh, maybe there's too much voiceover, or maybe like flashback voiceover, you know what I'm saying? But there's not. Like, it all works. It all thematically is resident.
It's just a masterpiece, honestly. I don't really know if there's any other way to describe it, but like, let's get into this episode. Let's sort of take it beat by beat and talk about the moments that really stuck out to us. I will say, first off, like starting the episode with Pax's son, who is building a bomb, and we know that's not good, right? We're like, uh-oh.
I was immediately like, it's a bomb.
Yeah, like the way that the camera cuts away from that, and you feel the tension until he finally slides the final few pieces in and the buttons turn on, and you feel like, okay, like this is the breaking point for the people of Ferrix. All roads lead to Ferrix. This is it. Like, this is when they say they have finally had enough. Like, that's the sound of a reckoning. You know, I don't think we give that line enough credit. Cassian returning home right in the beginning. Obviously, we get those opening scenes where Zan is talking to Brasso very loudly, and he's like, "Hey, I talked to Cassian." I'm like, "Dude, why are you
I'm here to
putting
say
this
that
out there in the street?"
I don't know if I said this last episode, but like, Brasso, very large.
Yeah,
large man. He makes everybody else look small in comparison.
Brasso is so caring and gentle, but he's also somebody that, as we see in this episode, will take Marva's brick and just hit somebody upside the head with it, and just start screaming. Which that might be an all-time Star Wars moment for me. Just hitting somebody with Marva's ashes. That's pretty great. Like, Marva fighting even beyond death, right?
She would have approved, is my thought.
But actually, before we even get too far into the episode, I just remembered too, I want to mention the just banger intro music for this episode. We can't forget to mention that.
Do you know what I realized? Upon the second watch? I think it's played by the makeshift, like the band that we hear.
Yeah.
Later in the episode. And so
the marching band.
I mean, and I don't think that you could get that from the first watch because you're like, oh, it's interesting. It sounds good. It sounds kind of like Community. It sounds a little dissonant. Like all the notes aren't 100% there all the time. But it's clearly building. It's like, oh, this is a moment. This is a movement. And then I watched it on the second time and I was like, oh, this is actually what we're hearing from these community, like this community and this marching band is the sound of these instruments and the sounds that they make. I was so I thought that was so interesting, and it kind of really gave that opening even more weight. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, you mentioned the dissonance, and it does become a little more synchronized and harmonious towards the end of it, like right when we get the full Andor logo. And I think that's intentional because as you think about the show and what the people of Ferrix have been through, they have all been a little dissonant from each other. Like they are not on one united front. Again, people were out for Cassian. They would have turned him in very easily. First couple episodes of the series, Cassian owes some people some debts. You know, Pelga is wanting him to leave his shipyard. And there's not really a sense of like we're all in this together. And so when you think about the music in that way, the music is off kiltered. And then by the end of it, the music all feels synchronized and like everybody's on the same page. Everybody's hitting the same notes together, right? Likewise, the show, the series, the people of Ferrix are hitting those notes together. They are in it together until the end. They are willing to give their life for this cause. They're on the same page completely, right? And so I think there's a little bit of symbolism and meta there with the music connecting to the story, which we know from Nicholas Britell. And when we talk to him, like that music and those intro scenes are supposed to connect to the story, like very, very specifically.
Yes. Can we also just say that I watched this episode and I was like, gosh dang it, we gotta re-interview Nicholas Britell. I have questions to ask. I need to know things. There's so much happening musically in this episode, and I would like to pick his brain about it. Like, I was like, I can't believe they didn't wait until the end of this season to talk about this because holy moly. I'm assuming like they filmed that, they recorded that on set. But also like just music wise, there's like a drum beat coming. And like on Ferrix, you can kind of hear this drum beat, and then like later in the show, like the time grappler kind of picks that beating heart up. But it makes it so tense and so ominous, and like, oh yes, we're definitely building up to something. And I was like, oh my gosh, Nicholas Britell, I love you.
And we know too, he's working on season 2, I believe. Yes, he mentioned that in his interview. So that makes me very happy because I think the music for the show is as much of a character as anything else. Likewise, like Star Wars music is that, right? Like Star Wars is the music is part of its DNA. So I'm happy he's coming back.
100%, but it makes it so interesting because the way that his music sounds and his music feels, I think, to an audience is completely different than what we know as like a viewer and a lover and a listener of John Williams. Like we can appreciate his music, but it feels different to the listener than Britell's music. And I find it so interesting. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. But.
No, yeah, I totally get that. And I think the way that music is integrated throughout this episode and its importance for the story was just so special. Like I just never thought I would get goosebumps and be so emotional over watching the Ferrix marching band go down the street and the you know, like the buildup of that, and even just the
clearly modified flutes, like somebody kit bashed flutes, and that's fucking awesome.
But you have that like slow buildup of the drums and sort of the somber, mournful music as they start to make their way through the town, and it's like at that point where they're at the end of the street and they're quiet and everybody's standing still and you're like, what's about to happen?
Right.
And it gets into that high tempo rhythm as they march down the street, B2's rolling along. And you see the other side of that, the Imperial presence fortifying themselves with shields and with armed troopers and snipers on the tower. And you feel like something bad is about to happen, but just the way that the music, and you feel like this town is using the music as rebellion. Like they're using that music to, I think of Princess and the Scoundrel, how Beth Revis wanted to use art as a form of rebellion. I feel like this is music as a form of rebellion. And we've really never seen, I don't think we've ever seen that in Star Wars, right? I mean, I can think of the Ewoks and the way they have their drums, but I don't really think that even comes close to this, because this is so just it is what drives everybody forward and to fight, right?
Mhm.
It's just so special. I can't believe we got that. Like I can't, like, people are going to be losing their minds over this scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, let's talk about it on Twitter or Hive or whatever or wherever.
And I can't wait for the soundtrack. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I
Okay,
think
where
that's
do we
next week on the 3rd. I think, I don't know.
December 2nd,
Yeah, so that would
Friday.
be next week. Yeah.
Oh my god, it's the same day as RM's album.
Ooh.
It's gonna be a good music day, is what I'm saying.
But we start on Ferrex in this episode with Daedra. First off, she lands her ship with some Death Troopers, and I don't know. In this moment, I really felt like she was emulating Orson Krennic quite a bit. You know how he's always flanked by Death Troopers, and
Yeah.
I love how she's sort of the Orson Krennic adversary of this series. Somebody who I think while Krennic was very ambitious and a little over his head, like she's obviously very cunning and she is one step ahead of everybody else, and she just thinks in such a different tactical way. So I think she's even better than Krennic. You know, she puts Krennic to shame a little bit.
The Krennic vibes in this episode are really great because not only does she give off Krennic vibes, but there's another like officer who has the same cut of cape that Krennic has at one point, but in black. And I was like, oh, I've seen that before.
She commands the room very easily, and it seems like there seems to be a little bit of annoyance from everybody else around her in this episode.
Oh
And
yeah.
can we maybe talk about that for a moment too? It's sort of separate from the big Ferrex scene, but the ISB killing Anto Krieger, and killing all of his men, and they're sort of celebrating it back at the base. And Partagas is talking to Daedra. Like, what did you make of that scene? Did you feel like there's a little bit of conflict happening there?
This isn't a dialogue, Dedra. It's just like I can't even do it justice. It's such a good delivery. Like it's such a good delivery. It's so interesting because Deidre wants to have her hands in all of the cookie jars, and nobody else wants her to have her hands in all the cookie jars because not only does it, mean less cookies for them, but it takes their power away, and it gives her more rank and importance and all that good stuff. And as we've kind of been talking about since Denise Goff has been talking about this character, she's like a woman in this world that is so white man dominated in the ISB. And so she's having to work, twice as hard to get the recognition. And so she is doing that. And then everybody starts to get angry at her because, she is maybe doing a little too much for their tastes, and maybe kind of splitting herself too thin or invading their work, of course. So yeah, Partagas, this whole Anto Krieger thing is very interesting. And I find it interesting that Anto Krieger is somebody who we've talked about for 4 episodes over the show. He's just a name though, and he has a hologram, but he's never somebody who shows up and then he's dead. I think that's a really fascinating plot tool. Something that happens completely off screen, but we know quite a lot about him despite never having seen him and not being a legacy character or anything like that.
What I found notable too about this interaction between Partagas and Daedra is I feel her power is slipping away, her influence is slipping away quite a bit. And I think it goes back to Luthen's point to Saw Gerrera, which was we need to make the Empire feel invincible. And so when we connect that to now the defeat of Anto Krieger, and we see that war room, they're clapping, they're cheering, they feel like they're on top of the world, right? And Partagas tells her, you want to start a conversation? Find access. She is very frustrated by the statement from him because it seemed like a couple episodes, they were all in on finding access. It seemed like that was the MO of the entire ISB. And so now that they've killed Anto Krieger, they're kind of feeling like they've done their duty. They've done the best they could, and they're feeling invincible, just like Luthen wanted them to feel. And I think Deidre feels like the mission and the thing that she has been dedicating herself to is no longer a priority because the Empire is just like, well, we took out a pretty important guy. So unless you know where Axis is, or unless you can find him right the second, we're not going to divert more resources into it. And I think they're going to lose interest over time, which might play into the rebellion's hands. Do you get that impression? Do you feel like that invincibility that they're feeling is going to be their kryptonite?
I mean, it totally is. That they underestimate the people who are doing the rebellion because they think that they, as the power, have the power. But the reality is that they don't have a monopoly on that power. That power is something that can be attained by anyone and through better means. And like that's what the rebellion is ultimately angling towards. So yeah, that's totally their kryptonite, and they're dumb. But I mean, it's a good thing that they're dumb because I don't want them to succeed.
But you're right. I mean, the hubris and the ignorance of the Empire is what allows them to allows the rebellion to form the way it does, because nobody sees them coming. And I think that also like leads me to um, this next portion of the episode, which is Clem's stone and Cassian remembering their moment in the kitchen when they're cleaning some carbon scored tools, and they're ones that they could sell at a pretty reasonable price and make some money off of. And when we talk about the idea of the Empire's ignorance, Clem gets to a really important idea here. He says, people don't look down to where they should. They don't look down. They don't look past the rust. Not us, though. Eyes open, possibilities everywhere. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting, because when I think of Marva's speech, in Marva's speech, there's also this idea of rust that comes up in there. She says, there is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. And so I'm like, okay, that's not coincidental that Marva and Clem bring up this idea of rust, and the Empire sees the rust being the everyday muck of the people that they want to crush beneath their boot, right? The Clems, the Cassians, the Nemeks, right? And to Nemek's point, surprise from above is never as shocking as one from below the rust. I just think that's like really interesting. That kind of connects this idea of rust, and the Empire doesn't look past the rust. They don't look where they should.
Yeah, well, the rust is simply an inconvenience to them. They need to cover the rust with a new coat of paint, or fix it with a new piece. But the reality is, like, the rust spreads, and the rust is also, you're talking about the idea of rust, like, it is not only like an earthy color, but like it has an earthy feel to it. And the rebellion is grassroots. It comes from the earth, it comes from the people. And so I think that's all connected and intentional as well.
But also too, last episode, the blanket that they put over Marva when they took her out of her home was rust colored.
You're right.
And so if the Empire doesn't look past the rust, doesn't look past the blanket on a person like Marva, right? Even at one point, I think Daedra kind of writes her off and says, oh yeah, we're watching Marva's home. Like, we're going to watch the mother's home, but we're not worried about her. She's kind of a nuisance, right?
Right.
And look what Marva does. She inspires rebellion, right? The Empire didn't look past the rust, didn't look past the blanket at the person underneath, and the sort of movement that she can inspire with her words. I think it's so cool how it all connects, right? And the language of the show and the themes and the connections are just so good, so good. And that's why that flashback is so important. Do you have any idea, like when he says the man who sees everything is more blessed than cursed? Did you have any like thoughts on that or what that might mean?
I think that's such an interesting quote, because I think we often talk about, or we frame that differently. We don't think that in our society. It's like ignorance is bliss. That's what we talk about. Or like that's a popular saying. But he's saying the man who sees everything is more blessed than the man who doesn't, right? Or more blessed than cursed. Because ultimately, I think seeing everything gives that person a sense of empathy, a sense of worldliness, a sense of care for others, and a sense of duty and purpose.
I connect it to Cassian, and Cassian smiles after he calls back these memories, and I think it's one of the first times we've seen him genuinely smile in the show, especially after everything he's been through. But the man who sees everything, Cassian, has seen everything, right? I mean, he went to Aldani and staged a raid there, and he went to prison and he met all those people inside of Narkina 5. And learned about each of their stories. He met Kino Loy, he met Olaf, he met Melshi. He goes back to Niamos and looks out at the sun and experiences that moment, right? He has seen so much. He's seen everything, right? And so I guess the way we could rephrase this is the man who sees everything, a Cassian who sees everything is more blessed than cursed, right? Because I think Cassian's life wasn't going so great up until the series, right? I mean, he's just kind of a thief and a liar, as Bix puts it, right? And so I think he is feeling more blessed by his experiences, despite the hardships he's come across. But he has like a renewed sense of purpose and something that drives him that didn't drive him before.
Right. Yeah. It's that duty and purpose that is the blessing in a sense, because it gives direction to one's life. Yeah, totally.
Eyes open, possibilities everywhere. So I just love the
Eyes
scene. It's such
open,
a short,
possibilities.
scene, but I think it's so important to Cassian, and I love
Yeah,
it.
it also just talks about like being scrappy and like, and I like that as well. Oh my gosh, we have so many avenues we could take in this conversation.
I
And we're
know
already been
there's
going
so
for
much.
40 minutes. S- Let's talk about, before we get into Marva's speech and ultimately Ferrex's rebellion, let's talk about the reunion of Brasso and Cassian, and kind of what Cassian, I guess we're just going to trace Cassian's journey for a second here, and what Cassian learns in this moment, about, his purpose. And I would like to read this quote. So basically they're talking and Cassian's like, I'll come back, or I was going to come back. And Brasso was like, everybody knows, like everybody knows. And Brasso says, this is what she said. Tell him none of this is his fault. It was already burning. He was just the first spark of the fire. Tell him he knows everything he needs to know and feels everything he needs to feel. And when the day comes and those two pull together, he will be an unstoppable force for good. Tell him I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong.
Damn.
Okay.
Damn.
We're not going to cry. I said those words out loud and like, woo, really punched me in the face a bit. But I think that's like the most powerful phrase, like the most powerful love. And I think it is the love that we most often see between, parents and their children. But like, I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong. That sort of unconditional support and care and acceptance of somebody else is really quite radical. I think especially in our world where we're so quick to make a judgment or drop someone, or change our opinion. So I think that message was really powerful, and I think it was really, really important for Cassian to hear that message, that from Marva through Brasso, because I think he feels so much guilt for not being there when she passed, and for not being able to rescue her.
Yeah, this was such a moment, because you think of Cassian's future and Marva recognizing he will become an unstoppable force for good, which we know that is what happens. She's correct. Oh, jeez. He knows everything he needs to know and feels everything he needs to feel. And then when the day comes and those two pull together, for Cassian, I mean, breaking that statement down, he's not aligning the things that he knows and his knowledge of the world with what he feels in his heart, because he knows the world is a tough place. He's seen it. Yeah, he's seen it happen. He lost Clem and etc. Right, and he's just kind of been on the run his whole life, one thing after another, trying to make ends meet. But the things that he feels, like I think of the things that he feels are the sense of loss and the sense of commitment to his family and to the people of Ferrix and the love that he held for Bix, right? And so when you combine those things, it's like, what do you want to do? You want to use your knowledge of the galaxy and of how things operate in this galaxy and how to survive, your knowledge of those things, to then protect the things that you feel for, like the love and the kinship and the friendship and the familial connections that you have in your life. And so when Cassian aligns those things, that's when he's going to be an unstoppable force, because we know Cassian at his heart is a good person, but he just needs to find the right moment where that all comes together. And I do want to say too, for Brasso and Cassian, I love them hugging. I love them hugging.
There's so much hugging in the show.
They hugged for quite a while too. Like, this was a very long hug. And just again, coming after the Melshi Cassian hug, I really, really appreciate the just gentle friendship between these two men and the affection that they show between each other. And it's just so important. I love that. And I love Brasso, and I love that he was not just a side character that was unnamed. Like, he is the man.
so thrilled that his character continued to grow throughout the series. Because I think in the first couple episodes we were like, oh man, he really kind of shows up and we don't know who he is really. And he continues to come back and like be a pillar of this community, and I'm just so glad because he's a great character. He's a great character, and he's played so well. So yeah, I also agree with you. The hugging is really good, and again, like I think this to spend the time on this casual like affection and connection in a friendship and like in a like love for one another, whatever that love may be, I think is really valuable. Especially in the Star Wars where like again, I think we mentioned this last week, but like some of the moments are always so big. We're focused on the big, loud, punchy blaster pew pew moments in Star Wars that we don't often, talk about these quiet moments in the same way. And I think that this show does such a good job of making these quiet moments, these affectionate moments, these moments of real human connection, the things that we want to talk about. So I really love that. I really love that. More hugging in the Star Wars.
Let's rewind a little bit to right before Cassian meets Brasso to the night before. He talks to Pegla and learns about Bix, and then he ends up back in his ship that he spent so many nights in. And lo and behold, he is, the night before this big rebellion on Ferrix, he is reading Nemec's manifesto.
I'm first going to say, I don't think it's the first time he's read it. And two,
well, first time we've seen it, at
back
least.
around. I knew we were going to hear it. I knew we were going to see it. I knew it. Not that they were not that I thought they were going to like drop any balls, but I was like, this is going to be the thing that radicalizes him. Like, this is going to be the key for him. And it was.
Well, because remember too, like when he opened the box in the last episode to make sure everything was there, he briefly flipped open the thing and you heard tyranny require, and then it stopped and then he like closed it.
Yeah.
Which is part of the speech. So I think we need to just read the speech from start to finish because we transcribed the whole thing as well as Marva's speech. But do you wanna take it away with Nemec's manifesto?
There will be a time when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere, and even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And remember this. The imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks, it leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Remember that. And know this, the day will come when all these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try. Ah!
Oh my God, we knew it was coming. We knew the manifesto was going to be read at some point, but oh baby, hearing it in Nemec's voice, the montage too that we see like we see Bix and we see Luthen and we see Cassian. We get glimpses, right? The calm before the storm, and there literally is a storm happening outside as well. Oh my gosh, I feel like we're going to spend a little bit of time here talking about this, but I mean, my key takeaways from this, just the too long don't read version, is that tyranny, like you said, tyranny requires constant effort, and so to have these authoritarian governments who are stripping people of their humanity and of their rights, and that requires upkeep, right? Whereas rebellion and the galaxy's urge to fight back against that sort of disorder or disarray is natural. It happens spontaneously. It happens without instruction. There are just random acts of insurrection that people don't even know they're actually part of a larger rebellion, right? It's like the Ghost Crew in Rebels. They're pulling off all these jobs, but do they really know that they're part of a larger whole? That they've already enlisted in the cause.
I think the opposite of control, like he says in the imperial, and then remember this, the imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. This idea of like, what is the opposite of control? And it's not spontaneity, but it's community. In my opinion, it is caring community. And so like, that's what everything is leading towards here. the empire is trying to break apart caring community, that no one is connected to one another. And like, that's, okay, bringing this back to our real world, because I think there are really valuable connections here. Talking about 2020, what a, especially in the US, like what a time to discuss and come together about justice and police brutality and civil rights and like racial justice and all of these really big and really, really important ideas. And if you were on Twitter at the time, Twitter was the place where all of this was collected and discussed and engaged upon in real time. It's where acts, of violence were, recorded and kept for records. It was a place where people said, "Oh, I was there. That's my piece of this. This is now my evidence that this happened to me." All that sort of stuff. And there is a sense that in this case, if you recall any of these videos that I can so clearly conjure up in my mind, where people would be peacefully walking down the street and protesting, and then they would be kettled in an intersection and tear gassed when they had no way out and they had no weapons on them, right? That is that need for control that is so unnatural. Otherwise, everybody who was there was practicing caring community for one another and for the people who weren't even there on the behalf of others. And so, like, I think that's one of those ideas that's so interesting and so present and important in our real world, because this authoritarianism that creeps up into governments around the world is a fear. It's something that requires a lot of effort, and what can stop that is communication with one another. And I think that's where we're kind of leading towards in the story, because we know that while the rebellion as we know it is not formed yet, we keep seeing the pieces get shifted and get closer into place. We know at some point, Mon Mothma and Cassian are going to be allies on the same side, actively knowing one another, because they're in the same room, it come Rogue One. But they're not there yet. So I think that's really interesting. Right now, like, Luthen controls kind of all the he's like a Venn, or not like a Venn diagram, like a stem graph. Like, he's at the top of like the family tree. I don't know how to describe this, but I know what I'm seeing in my mind.
Yes. Yeah, like, so many great points, Sarah. And I think the key here too is it just takes one thing to bring it all down. All these skirmishes, all these battles, these moments of defiance will have flooded the bank of the Empire's authority, and then it'll be too many, right? And so the Empire, in its desperate attempt to do something so unnatural, can be overwhelmed by one single thing, right? And so for Ferrix, it's the single thing is Marva. Marva is the one single thing that breaks the siege. And looking forward to Rogue One, Jyn Erso is the single thing, right? Like, she is somebody who it's not a problem if you don't look up. I'll just never look at the Imperial flags across the galaxy. I just live my life. That's the way that Cassian lived his life early in the series, until he had all these experiences and his eyes opened up and he no longer slept. So Jyn Erso becomes a single thing. And I think too, like, one single thing, I think of kind of K2SO and when he's like, one shot and the whole thing goes down. But I also think there's a little bit of poetry there, because it's just that one, looking forward to A New Hope. It's the one single proton torpedo in the exhaust port, takes the whole station down, and it destroys the Death Star. One single person, Luke Skywalker, breaks the siege. Obviously with the help of so many other people who lose their life and who contribute, but it's the willpower of certain people in the rebellion who can really have that moment of defiance and flood those banks of the Empire. So I just love this speech so much. I think it's so important, and I think it's something that we will look at within the context of the rebellion versus the Empire, because it is so important. It's again, the Empire is unnatural, and the world, to be balanced, has to move towards the natural, but with spontaneity. Because people want to move towards the natural. They don't want to live under something that is unnatural.
It's that, and what you've been kind of hinting at with everybody having their personal moment of rebellion. It's all of those spontaneous moments and those sparks kind of igniting in like catching with one another. That's so great about the idea of rebellion ultimately. Yeah, Nemec. If anybody wants to write the whole thing and publish the whole thing, I will read it. Please.
That's where I wish more was happening with publishing for these TV shows, because an entire Nemec manifesto would be so good. I would read it.
Like there's a very very nerd person in me who's like, yes, please just give me all the in-universe documents, please. I will read them as if it's like a freaking textbook, please. I'll get the highlighter out, all that jazz.
The Celebration special edition where you open it up and it actually plays Nemec's voice for the entire audiobook. Yeah, it's like $300. I would buy it.
Yes, that, and then also just like the textbook version of all these things. And then I would also love a textbook version of like what Order 66 actually reads. Cause like, maybe it's like maybe it's like a, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, or like a well-regulated militia. And it's like, where's the comma? What does the comma mean?
Yeah.
But in Star Wars, who knows? That would be really interesting.
So yeah, we have this manifesto being read, and Cassian looking out into the scrapyard with the storm coming, and try is that final word. And I think about it, and to me it means try no matter what, and still some sort of natural order to the unnatural, and try to break that authority and try to make it leak even more. It's almost hard to talk about this because it's so grand in its thought and its intelligence that it's almost, that's how good the writing is on the show. I'm like, I don't even know how to talk about it.
Right. We're like, I'm not smart enough for this.
It's like when we talk about Alexander Freed, I'm like, this man, his brain is operating at a different capacity.
Yeah. Just in a different, or whenever we have the opportunity to like, interview someone who has like a really impressive credential, we're like, oh my God, we're talking to a Harvard grad. Like, I can't do that on my daily. Anyway, that's beside the point.
And lastly, like in terms of trying, I think of Cassian saying, I couldn't face myself if I gave up now. Like the odds are not in their favor for Scarif, but guess what he does? He tries.
Take all the chances until the chances are spent! !
Yeah. So I think that word probably sticks with Cassian for the rest of his life. Try. Do it if it's risky. Do it if it could mean your life. If you don't try, you'll never know what could come from it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Now, before we get to the final day on Ferrix, the big battle, the big rebellion, let's head over to Coruscant quickly and talk a little bit about Mon Mothma, who has a moment that kept me sweating. Mon Mothma unbuckling the clasp on her collar and kind of throwing her robe open.
Oh
I was like,
gosh. I think that was the clasp was held by Magnus as just like a costumey person. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I just want to say it was really hot. That's I need somebody to sedate me. Anyways, they had this conversation with Perrin in the taxi, and we know from last episode, Mon says that she has a solution, which we don't really know. We infer that it's going to be the marriage of Leda to Davos Golden's son, which Leda gladly welcomes at the end of this episode, because of her commitment to these horrible traditions and her cult that she's a part of, her youth group. I was not expecting Mothma to play this game with Perrin to put him in the spotlight and draw attention to him, where maybe his gambling problems have come back.
Oh, is she making this shit up?
Yeah, 100%.
Brad, I'm just realizing, listeners, I'm just realizing this right now.
Yeah, this is a front. This is a front because
I mean, I'm not this smart to talk about this stuff.
My impression is that Perrin gambling again is the front for where the $400,000 go, where the 400,000 credits go. And then why is she in league with Davos Golden? Because she does not want the secret of Perrin, who is in has his gambling problem again, to get out. So who does she go to? She goes to Davos Golden to say, okay, I need some money to fix this issue, right?
Wow, you're so smarter than me.
She knows Cloris is listening, and we see Cloris is working for Blevin in the ISB, and Blevin says Perrin digging a hole could be helpful because Mothma is already a person of interest, which doesn't bode well for her, but
yeah, it puts her in the eye a little more.
It's smart of her to know, like, I could maybe use Perrin to my advantage here and to have a little bit of a cover for what I'm doing and come up with an excuse, but still do the marriage as well. And we do get a Canto Bite mention.
We do get a Canto Bite mention. I was like, yes.
I was like, yeah, I hate Perrin, but I'll watch the episode where he goes to Canto Bite. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. Extra episode, episode 13.
You know, that's the kind of like connection points I want. Last Jedi connection points. Anyway, yeah, I thought that, wow, I can't believe I didn't realize that she was doing this herself. I mean, not that I didn't think she was smart enough to do this herself, because of course I did. I love her. I would do anything for her. But I just wasn't thinking with that lens at all of like, oh, this is the plan. But it makes literally so much sense. And yeah, throw your husband under the bus. He sucks. Go for it, please. Yeah. Anyway, I think we should also talk about the end moment when she does decide, or not decide, but like we do see the moment where she is introducing Leida to Devo's son, and how fucking heartbreaking that is. Like she looks so devastated in the quietest way.
Yeah, because as we talked about last episode, the heartbreaking nature of it is not only that Mothma has to go through with this, but because she knows Leida will probably accept it and be okay with it. I think she feels some sort of sense of failure with how she raised her daughter, because Mothma hated this tradition.
Well, it's caused her so much pain.
Yeah. And so it's like, maybe I can do this different with my daughter. Maybe I can avoid this scenario. And her daughter grows up to seek out the elder and start her youth group and say some very scary things in unison with the rest of the kids at the dinner table, which is still creepy, very creepy. Like it's giving Children of the Corn. But yeah, it is heartbreaking. And I think this is sort of the final straw that is, I do think maybe this is the final straw for Mothma to say, okay, any sort of hope that I had for my personal life and my family and maybe changing the narrative is now gone. And I no longer have that attachment. Like I can become fully radicalized. I can really lead into the rebellion more than I ever have before, because I don't really have anything to lose at this point. I've already lost my husband, and I've definitely lost my daughter at this point if she's marrying this other kid who is the son of a crime lord, a thief in some ways, like a wealthy businessman, a gangster.
Everything sucks. And that's the vibe I get at the end, is like, yeah, there's kind of like hope for going forward, but like, wow, everything sucks for everybody in this moment. Like people are making really tough choices in order to take the next step. And that's really hard. Yeah, that moment kind of broke me at the end. I did see it coming ultimately, but doesn't change it. I think this is also perhaps a good point with Mothma, just to mention, how much her style changes in the next 5 years to when we see her in Rogue One and ultimately in the original trilogy. Of course, this is a product of, these things being in separate time periods, and, about these, we're living almost 50 years after the original movie was made. So like there's a different context in which we're creating costuming and that sort of stuff. But somebody had mentioned on Twitter, like, oh, maybe this is a mourning clothes, or maybe some sort of traditional Chandrilan clothing that may signify something. And it's like, what if she loses Leida or Perrin or both, and this is what she chooses to wear in remembrance of them, a remembrance of her culture. And that's a devastating idea.
Yeah, the whole Mothma situation is just tragic. I feel for her. I'm excited to see where she goes in season 2 and where we meet Mothma at the very first episode of season 2, and considering a year time jump.
Hanging out with my man Jimmy Smith.
Tacoma. Oh, okay, never mind.
Well, Jimmy Smiths. Like not. Yeah, I mean, of course, like Tacoma, eyebrow raise. But like Jimmy Smiths, I want them to plot, please.
Yeah, Jimmy Smiths is in Andor season 2. I think we just need to accept it. So,
but what if he's not? But what if he's not?
He is in the meeting room on Yavin.
Yeah, but like, what if
he has to be there?
But he's only in the meeting room on Yavin very briefly. What if he's just like
Right.
Anto Krieger, where he just like gets mentioned over a bunch of episodes, we never actually see him?
I'll
Like,
take a
what? I'm
bail mention
serious.
over
I'm
nothing.
serious. What if?
Well, as we know, Sarah, you like taking losing bets. So we'll leave it to the listeners and to the showrunners to disprove or prove us right or wrong. So with that being said,
Honestly, prove me wrong, please.
let's head back over to Ferrix for this final explosive finale and some just incredible moments that we're going to be talking about for ages. And we mentioned up top the marching band and their role in all of this. We see Vel and Luthen are back together. Vel has a moment with Cinta that is also just very soft, and Vel sort of begging Cinta to pay attention to me a little bit. You know, like I'm here, I'm alive. Like, can we have a moment with each other? So they're getting their moment. Cyril and Mosk are back on Ferrix. They exchange hats very awkwardly. They're such dorks, such idiots. I don't know. They're just idiots.
That was like, you could tell that Mosk was like, he doesn't like the fit. He doesn't like the texture. He doesn't like the cut of the hat. I'm going to have to switch it. I'm going to switch it. That's what I'm going to do. That's why I'm a good friend. I'm a good friend. I'm a good friend. I'm going to switch it. I switch it. Put a hat on. Thank God. This is over.
And then what really sets everything into motion is Nuri, who turns in Cassian and says where he is, and gets taken in by Clovis as a prisoner. And the pieces start moving very quick. Daedra and the Death Troopers start walking around and trying to figure out where Cassian is, and they want to shoot him out of the building. Basically, they send him Clovis up the ladder. He's not there. He's still in the tunnels underneath, trying to rescue Bix. And he ultimately gets to the location where Bix will be. But we hear the speech from Marva first, out in the town square. So B2 settles in, has a little hologram thing up top, and we knew like Ferrix had his traditions, and we knew the funeral was going to be a huge part of this episode. I thought, with a funeral, there are words that are obviously said to remember the dead, but I never would have thought that the dead would sort of remember themselves, and not only not want to be remembered, but to want to lift others up.
It's interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things, because we talked a lot with Swara last week about like community and Ferrix and like this idea of breaking them and what it all means for the community and for the people. And I really think that all is so shown there when Marva gets to say her final words. Like, most of the time, when somebody passes, somebody else speaks on their behalf and speaks about their life and their importance to them and to their loved ones and to the world. But the dead don't get to speak for themselves, because by nature of them being gone. And the fact that, like, on Ferrix, or at least with Marva in the very least, she had the opportunity to speak for herself in this way and really kind of rally everyone together one last time. And she was able to do that because of her position as somebody who is respected and looked up to in the community. And I think that, like, she used that position well at the end of the day.
Well, let's go through this speech, because it's a good one. It's a very good one. So let's do it. My name is Marva Karasi Andor. I'm honored to stand before you. I'm honored to be a daughter of Ferrix, and honored to be worthy of the stone. Strange. I feel as if I can see it. I was 6, I think, the first time I touched a funerary stone, heard our music, felt our history, holding my sister's hand as we walked all the way down Fountain Square. Where you stand now, I've been more times than I can remember. I always wanted to be lifted. I was always eager, always waiting to be inspired. I remember every time it happened, every time the dead lifted me with their truth. And now I'm dead, and I yearn to lift you. Not because I want to shine or even be remembered. It's because I want you to go on. I want Ferrix to continue. In my waning hours, that's what comforts me the most. But I fear for you. We've been sleeping. We've had each other in Ferrix, our work, our days. We had each other, and they left us alone. We kept the trade lanes open, and they left us alone. We took their money and ignored them. We kept their engines churning, and the moment they pulled away, we forgot them. Because we had each other. We had Ferrix. But we were sleeping. I've been sleeping. And I've been turning away from the truth I wanted not to face. There is no wounds There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's here, and it's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep. It's easy for the dead to tell you to fight. And maybe it's true. Maybe fighting is useless. Perhaps it's too late. But I'll tell you this. If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow. If I could have just like give a 10-minute standing ovation, which I probably could have in my living room, but I should have. If we had seen that in a theater, I don't know. I feel like the crowd would be like going nuts. Like this is the Avengers Assemble moment for Star Wars, but like infinitely times better.
Right. And it's like, and it, you know, again, how people cheer for their favorite sports teams. That's how I want to cheer for this episode and for these speeches and for the speeches in episode 10, but like especially this moment where everything turns and like the action kind of begins. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful, pretty incredible speech from her, and it really kind of brings together the whole story. She's always kind of been a fighter, or been like scrappy and resourceful and doing the best to live her life. And you know, she kind of realized the Empire here, or realized the burden of the Empire here towards the end, and ultimately did make something of it. You know, she didn't waste her opportunity.
Really notable in that first part of the speech. I love how she's being very personal about it and talking about her sister in the way that they would go into the square and listen to previous daughters of Ferrix who had died and give their words to everybody. And Marva wanting to be inspired, and she remembers every time the dead lifted her with their truth. And this idea that in death, not to be remembered or like glorified, but to lift others to keep going forward. And immediately I think of like Rogue One again, because the crew in Rogue One, they all die. They're not remembered in A New Hope, right? Like General Dundana is like, the plans brought to us by Princess Leia. I'm like, you take Leia's name out of your mouth and replace it with Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Chirrut Îmwe, you know? These heroes aren't remembered for the things that they've done, but because of their sacrifice and because they were able to achieve these things, they lift others up in the process, and they allow the rebellion to go on. They allow the rebellion to continue. And that's, you know, in my waning hours, that's what comforts me the most. And Jyn and Cassian's waning hours, as they watch the Death Star blast and that heat come towards them in those waves, they're comforted knowing that the rebellion will continue because of what they just did. Like, I know it sucks that we're about to die, but like, we did it for a good cause, and we did it for something that matters.
I want to talk a little bit about kind of the action in this and how we see that unfold for these characters. Because as I mentioned kind of earlier with Nemik's manifesto, it relates, you know, in my mind to ideas regarding, you know, 2020 being just a key example, you know, like in my life, but also just it's relevant and recent for me. I think that the Marva's speech, the action that happens directly after this, where the ISB and the Imperials ends up showing acts of force. They try and end the funeral, the speech, and then they attack all these innocent people. And really reminded me of those images of police brutality that, you know, I think we all saw in 2020 and continue to see, you know, not only in the US, but throughout the world, etc. You know what I'm saying? And that are so horrible to witness. And you really kind of felt the weight of the struggle between the Empire and the people of Ferrix. And you felt that, you know, these are good people, well-intentioned people who were being brutalized, and like the action itself is really tough to watch because there is dragging, there is you know, kicking and pushing and shields and just like lots of really ugly sound. And I just thought it was so interesting that this battle was portrayed in this way. It wasn't something that was coordinated. There weren't blasters on, you know, the people of Ferrix's side largely. And they were outgunned, and they had the least amount of resources by their side, but they still rose up. And whether it be the kid who ended up making the bomb that kind of turns the tide of the battle, whether it be Brasso and his kind of leadership to begin the fighting, whether it be just one of those musicians who got caught in it because of where they were and because they decided to stand up. It's just a very interesting way to portray that, instead of like choreographed, and it feels choreographed, if that makes sense.
I think this entire scene is so striking. There's no hesitation from anybody there. Everybody's committed to it, right? And you relate it to the real world as well, and some of those the imagery that we see in this episode, during the summer of 2020, especially. And again, just going back to the idea in this speech about sleeping and how the people of Ferrix have been sleeping because things happening around the galaxy don't necessarily affect them. So why should they care? They can just ignore those things. Likewise, in our real world, I think for so long, people were just very quick to ignore problems that didn't directly affect them, which is not, I don't think, is a good way to live. Like, you shouldn't live your life selfishly. You should live your life trying to raise up your communities and live your life with other people at the forefront of your mind. What can I do to help other people live better? And that's kind of like Marva's whole point is like, we have been sleeping for far too long, and now it's affecting us. And like, we shouldn't care simply just because it's affecting us, but we should care because we let it get to this point, like because of our ignorance, and because ignorance was bliss, right? And to Clem's point, seeing everything as a blessing, and for Ferrix, it was a curse for so long, because look where it got them now. And so to see all those people recognize that, and recognize that they've been ignoring it, and to then just be ready to fight and have this whole sequence is just really compelling.
Yeah, I'm really right there with you. And also, I have to mention, while we're here, who is punctuating this battle noise-wise?
The Time Grappler, baby.
My man, the Time Grappler. I'm enamored with the way they created the soundscape, and also the Time Grappler kicking the stormtrooper off the tower. Yeah.
That was a good moment. Would you have ever
stuff.
have thought early in the season when you saw that Time Grappler, you're like, he's gonna kick a stormtrooper off?
He shows up in like 2 minutes in the first or the second episode of Andor, and I was like, that's it. That's all for the Time Grappler. And then he kept coming back, and I was like, F yeah, this is my man. I love no one but him. And then he kicks a stormtrooper off his platform, and he's like, F you guys, I'm the Time Grappler. I will continue to grapple time. But this is also what I mentioned, like in the soundscape, where we kind of have this beating drum motif as people are kind of coming to Ferrix as this episode is kind of getting going. And then the Time Grappler picks that up with the grappling of time towards the end. And then it becomes like really diegetic sounds, all that are punctuating like for our characters. So I don't know. I'm enamored with it. I love it.
Amidst all this chaos, you have Cyril Karn. And Daedra sort of gets swept up in the action and in the chaos, and she falls to the ground quite aggressively.
Hold on.
She gets hit.
Before we do that, he goes, "She's here. It's her." Now you make
Mosk is like, calm yourself, please.
It's her.
I thought Daedra was going to get torn apart by these people. I thought she was done for. I should have thought better than they would off a character like that in that moment. But you get so swept up in the action and in the tension and the stakes of this rebellion that you're like, anything could happen at this point, right?
Right.
But she gets a pistol in her back. She gets lugged into a closet, like a supply closet somewhere on the street. And here is Cyril Karn. She picks up an object, puts it right at his throat. And they're in this closet for quite a while, heavy breathing, very close together. I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Okay.
This was a scene. This was a wow.
It was a lot of things at once. And like, maybe I shouldn't air all the things, like maybe I shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's like weird. And also the situation is like a little steamy, but at the same time, deeply uncomfortable.
And incredibly awkward too.
Wildly written, brilliantly acted scene where Cyril is like holding her, and she's, I mean, truly just trying to figure out where she is and who she is and who he is and how she's alive. And she's also like grateful to be alive and not dead, but also alarmed that he's the one that's got her. But also, like, there's a point where Cyril absolutely is looking at her lips, and like there's a point where they're just kind of staring into each other's eyes. It's a weird scene, and I think it's supposed to make us feel this uncomfortable and like this just like unsettled about it. Like that's totally the point. But like, oh my god.
Yeah, Daedra says I should thank you. He goes, you don't have to. Yeah, the scene, like, I'm not really sure how it's supposed to make me feel, but I'm intrigued. I'm looking. I'm wondering.
Right.
I'm wondering where these two characters are going to go, because they do make it out of this alive. And at the end of the episode, we see Mosk just sitting on the street. He looks very disheveled. He is drinking out of a flask, and I think it is so interesting how he started the season going through town in his police uniform and causing chaos, and then here he is, kind of the lowliest point in his life, maybe. Like, he's been ditched by his friend for a woman, and he is sort of riffraff that nobody's even giving a second glance to. And even if people do recognize him, they recognize what he did before on Ferrix, and they don't want to give him even the light of day, any attention whatsoever. But I anticipate Cyril will get a promotion in season 2. I feel like he is going to. I feel like this moment, maybe Daedra thinks a little differently of him, because he didn't come to Ferrix for her, right? He came to Ferrix for Andor, and she just happened to be there. But he still kind of makes her the focus. And so I just wonder, like, what she truly feels about that, and like if she's sort of giving like a quid pro quo where it's like, okay, you save my life, I'll give you a promotion, sort of deal. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. And I guess all we can do is wait to find out, because either they, she's disgusted by him ultimately and is like really freaked out by him and doesn't want her, him anywhere near her, or is like, oh, he's a really powerful ally and he actually looks out for me when no one else does. It could go either way, I think, for these characters. And they are such chaos monsters that like it really could go anyway.
But finally here we get to Cassian. He rescues Bix. Bix is in just such bad shape. She almost doesn't want to leave because she's afraid of the Imperials being upset, which is just so heartbreaking. The fact that she is just, she's that scared. But
that out of it.
Cassian carrying her out, she's injured. There's something that hits different about seeing Cassian shoot a death trooper, let me tell you. Having flashbacks to the climbing sequence on Scarif where Orson Krennic is at the door up top with the death troopers, and they're shooting at Cassian while they're climbing and stuff. But also, like, Cassian lugging out an injured Bix throughout all the smoke. It kind of had the same imagery of Jyn Erso carrying an injured Cassian out onto the beach of Scarif. A little bit of parallel image there. So, but I love the fact that we get to the transport. Cassian lugs her there. You got Brasso. You got Pax's son. You got one of the daughters of Ferrix on there. B2 Emo is there as well. And I love that everybody here makes it out alive. Most importantly,
everyone makes it.
Yeah, they're going to go to Ganji Moon. B2 has his moment. I never got to see you.
Oh my God, my little heart.
I'm counting on you. You always say that, and you always come through. And then Bix says he'll find us. Cassian will find us, and he says, "I will find you." And Bix smiled too when he said that.
It's heartbreaking, because like, she's probably really, really out of it and like is not fully understanding that he's actually there, perhaps even.
Totally.
But also like that these characters are split up again. But also like, not everybody made it from the town. Like the only people that are leaving are that group of people that, we know of. So there's a lot of bittersweetness in that escape for them, I think, and for the viewer. And we only hope that like all these characters do return in the second season. Maybe they all get recruited into the rebellion.
I did love too Bix when they were doing Stone and Sky, and they're having that chant.
Oh yes.
We get the close up of her in her jail cell, and she is sort of humming along to that, as well as the tune of the marching band. So you see a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of her humanity still inside of her. So it's not completely
Right.
vanquished. There's a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
flame.
Totally. Totally. I think that brings us. Does this bring us to the very end?
Oh yes,
Have we made it?
yes.
So like Luthen or Cassian leaves, and we're like, okay, where's Bestie? Where are you going? And he's on the Fondor, and he was like, "Bitch, you thought," to Luthen. And he asks, "You came here to kill me, didn't you?" And Luthen says, "You don't make it easy." And he says, "I will now. What game is this? No game. Kill me or take me in." What a gamble. What a gamble he's making, because he just promised Bix, an old flame, someone he cares about very deeply, a friend, that he's going to come find them. What a gamble. And it works. Obviously, because we know he dies in 5 years and not right now.
I wonder what will happen. Yeah, what a gamble indeed. I mean, this is such an exclamation point of an ending, right? It doesn't have the flashy ending where the ship zooms off into the stars. It doesn't have the triumphant like music of victory. It leaves you hanging. It's a true cliffhanger like here, despite us knowing where he's going to be going.
It's also like just so quiet, like as you mentioned, but I don't know, when I think it was Tony Gilroy was like, the last line of this episode season is really important. Like, okay, what's it going to be? It's got to be something real big. It's got to be something big and grand and, speechifying and all this good stuff. And it's not. It's like two people making a bet. Like, we're going to fix this together kind of a thing. And I think it's pretty incredible. And how does Luthen and Cassian, how do they get along? How do they ally with one another? I think that'll be something really interesting to discover over the second season, as perhaps their positions, the difference in their positions within the context of the rebellion are maybe like a little less far apart.
I can't wait for season 2. I really cannot. And this is just such a good way to end. I couldn't
And I'm
believe
gonna
when it
have
ended.
to.
I was like, that's it? That's the ending? No, I want more. I want
Right.
all 12 episodes next, like now.
I don't want it to be over, but I need more.
Yeah. Well, hey, but wait.
Yeah.
There's more.
There is
because we got a post-credit scene.
Guys, did you know there's a post-credit scene for Tumblr? Like, what is it? 2013? Twitter probably already told you. But if not, pause, go watch it, come back.
Yes, please do that. And we'll give you a second here. Okay, welcome back. We get a close-up of some droids, and they are lugging around those parts from Narkina 5 that the prisoners were building. A little zoomy zoom out, and lo and behold, it's the Death Star laser dish. A little more zoomed out, and it's a fully built Death Star waiting to install the laser. Holy shit. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit. This will be something that's probably talked about ad nauseum by the fandom. I'm not sure what the general reactions will be.
I think there's going to be discourse.
There will certainly be discourse, but I mean, that's kind of a par for the course with Star Wars, right? I mean, there's always discourse. I don't really care what other people think. What my thought is the show did not rely heavily on these sort of okay, let's connect this to this to this to this. It doesn't have a lot of that throughout season 1. It's not really sold on the idea of being Star Wars. It's sold on the idea of being this sort of political spy thriller, right? That's the show. It's about Cassian Andor and the people around him. So for us to get a 15-second clip at the end of a post-credits scene that if you took it out of the post-credits even, it wouldn't. It's not like the post-credits scene was more Cassian or more Luthen, right? It's just sort of something that's happening in the background that we should kind of be aware of. And for the general viewer, that might be helpful. But I think the show has sort of earned the ability to be hey, remember this? This is where we're leading to. This is what is going to define Cassian's life over these next 4 years is figuring out what is the Empire building, and it's ultimately going to be the thing that kills Cassian Andor. So of course it's going to be a part of the show Andor. Like you can't almost separate the Death Star and Cassian Andor. Like they're destined for one another, you know?
Yeah, I understand that. And I don't disagree with that. I think that that's fair. Like they're kind of on a they're on a collision course.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think for me, while I liked the imagery of the scene itself, like I thought it was interesting and ominous, like I don't like the tag of the ending as much. Like I think the ending is really strong just with like the Luthen and Cassian ending, and that feels like it tonally matches with the season and the show and the character and like what the story that it's trying to tell. And for me, this doesn't entirely like tonally match or visually match with what I'm feeling in the moment as a viewer, and also just like what I want as a viewer. Because like again, like I don't like that it's a tag kind of on the end, but I also don't think it fit within the episode itself. So I don't know if I think it was needed. But those are my thoughts. But I'll be really curious to see what everybody else kind of thinks online and in the Star Wars community, because I think there will be a wide range of what people kind of take away from this thing. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I like the imagery, but like I didn't like the placement necessarily.
Yeah. But I think even too, like you could just turn off the episode after the Luthen and Cassian scene and you have a great episode of television, right? Like I don't think
Yeah. Well, that's
Death
what I'm
Star,
saying is like,
yeah, the Death Star sequence is definitely tonally different. But I think the episode still stands on its own. Like a post credit scene is not necessarily still a part of the episode. You know what I mean? It's totally disparate from that, I think.
yeah, but like, yes, I do think it's totally disparate for that. And that's part of the problem I have with it. Is just like that it stands aside so much. And it doesn't speak to the themes of the show. Like I talked about Wakanda Forever last time on the show and talk about it again. The mid-credit scene of Wakanda Forever made me cry because it was tonally resonant and kind of just was an extended play on like the end of the movie. I'm not going to spoil it here, but it's very nice and emotional. Um, and like that's what you come to expect from those things. But I don't want post-credit scene to be something we come to expect from Star Wars. I didn't like it with the Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett trailer sort of thing. So I think it's just not my Star Wars thing too. This is why we have conversations about things. High five.
Woohoo. But yeah, no, it'll be interesting though in season 2, like how the Death Star starts to come into play. And like, do we hear like rumblings of it in the background? Like, is Orson Krennic in the picture? I'm just curious, like how long relative to Rogue One, like they know the Empire is building something, and then it eventually leads to Galen Erso and Jyn Erso. But like, how long before that are the rebels hearing those whispers, right? And so that'll be interesting. Like, when is the first time that Cassian Andor and crew hear about this weapon or something that is being built? And while I think you said like the end credit scene doesn't necessarily connect to the themes of the show, which again, it's only 15 seconds, so it's not really much it can do. But I think imagery wise, it definitely connects, because I think of the intro credit scene where you get like the kind of thing that looks like a planet that's starting to rotate, at the center of the screen, and it becomes the Rebellion logo.
Mm-hmm.
I think this sort of had the same visual as well, like with the center of the screen, there was a little bit of rotation happening with the Death Star. So I think for me, it kind of evoked that as well. Like, oh yeah, we've seen that for 12 episodes. But now it's flipping it on its head a little bit. It's not the Rebel logo, it's the Death Star, right? So there's the other side of the coin, which I thought was, from a visual perspective, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, well, that brings us to the end of Andor season 1, which I hate to say it. I hate to say it. I'm kind of sad.
But before we actually finish this episode, we should do our and ors. Our Andor is our silly segment at the end of every Andor episode, where we talk about two of our favorite things, our and pose a silly question or a serious question with the or. So my and for today, oh my gosh, there's so many points to talk about. My and for today is going to be And then remember this. The imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. And the time grappler, time grappling. That was really, I really ignored that scene that made me cry, but maybe I'm doing that so I don't cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell him I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong. You know what? I said it again and I got teary-eyed again.
Jesus.
I'm not going to do it again.
Okay. We can't cry at the end of this. We've made it too far. My ands would be Cassian, like right when all the action starts. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot to mention too, like Marva's hologram, Galen Erso's hologram, Jin Cassian, like it's connected, right? Like,
yeah.
The inciting speeches that change their life forever. But the first of my and specifically is when all the action starts after Cassian sees Marva's speech, and the music picks up. He just like punches a guy in the throat and like takes him down and shoots him with a blaster inside one of the hallways. I was like, oh damn, sir, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was cool. And and I really loved the Stone and Sky chant. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a great moment of unison and togetherness for the people of Rix. Okay, I got a really good ore for you, Sarah.
I'm really ready.
Would you rather get hit in the head with a brick made of Marva's ashes by Brasso, or kicked off the bell tower by the time grappler?
Kicked off the bell tower by the time grappler. That's the death I'm choosing.
That's the death.
That's the death.
I feel like that was too easy of a.
The idea of getting hit in the head with a brick is pretty bad. I'd rather just I guess hit my entire body. I don't know.
But not just any brick. Marva.
The brick of Marva's ass.
Marva bricked. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have an answer to that question?
I want to get hit by the brick specifically because of Brasso's like feral scream afterwards.
Oh, okay.
I love it when Star Wars is feral scream, like feral Rey. Now we got feral Brasso.
All right. I don't disagree with that. Okay. My or is a serious question and not a silly one. Sorry. If you had to pick a speech, Nemec's manifesto or Marva's, like, eulogy for herself, essentially.
Oh, goddamn.
I know.
That is a tough one, but my gut tells me Marva, just because Fiona Shaw has just been such a blessing this season. I think right until the very end, she just changed, like, she changed everything. She changed everything on Ferrix and for Cassian. And I think the speech makes me tear up every time I listen to it, and it will continue to do that. So
right.
You just can't fight the Empire,
I'm right there with you.
So good. So good. So you would choose Marva's speech as well?
I mean, you can't beat Fight the Empire. No, but I think I would choose Nemec's manifesto, and that's why we read the ones that we did. I mean, it's great. But I feel really tied to like the idea of his manifesto, and I feel tied to this what he's saying, like all these disparate elements kind of working together. And also freedom is a pure idea that I love that.
You really can't go wrong either way. So both great choices. That's a great ore. Great ore. It's like you can't go wrong with getting hit in the head by a brick by Brasso or get kicked off a tower by the time grappler. There are so many great choices.
It's tough
for
out there.
Ores this season. Yeah. And I can't wait to see what other ores we come up with in season 2. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode, but we're happy to have provided a thoughtful discussion on this finale because it really is just one of the best. And if you want to hear more of our thoughts on all things Star Wars and more Andor once season 2 drops at some point in the far off future, Sarah and I are on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Goodreads. You can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and we are also now on Hive. Hive is like seemingly the place where everybody from Star Wars Twitter has migrated to, which is just such a great place. So go create your profile there and follow us on Hive. It's awesome. And wherever you listen to our podcasts, they're pretty much anywhere you can listen. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our show so our episodes drop into your feed, and leave us a rating if you would be so kind.
Also, we have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1, and we are grateful, as we say every episode, but but truly, 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 for everyone who subscribes to the Patreon. They are Amy, Brian with an I, Brian with a Y, Cheryl, Clay, Danny, Davis, Dylan, Huang, Jen, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Levi, Lindsay, Lucy, Rob, Taper Bouquet, Scott, Santa, Skytalker, Stephen, Travis, and Tom. Thank you all very much for your support. And thank you to everyone who has joined us for the past 1 hour and 45 minutes or so on this conversation with Andor. We hope you have enjoyed this season of Andor just as much as we did. Let's continue that conversation on the social medias. We love to hear from you. We love being a part of the Star Wars community. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for being lovely. Hope you're drinking some water. Hope you're having a good day. Stream Indigo by RM in a couple weeks. That's it.
Thank you all for joining us on Andor Candor this season. It has been such a pleasure. Shout out to Skylar for Dusko for the amazing art as well for each of these episodes. Appreciate you so much, friend. Until next time, everybody. May the Force be with you always.